Also, check this out. What are those, begonias? I don't know. What I love too is growing plants that are culturally familiar to the community is so important. If you look all the way back there, that looks like composting. It looks like they've got composting going on, which is so awesome too, because composting is really hard to do in a neighborhood like this. We just don't have the pickups and the ease of it that a lot of other communities have. So that's really how you do it right. That is such a core component of the Green New Deal, is having all of these projects make sense in a cultural context. And it's an area that we get the most pushback on, because people say, like, why do you need to do that? That's too hard. But when you really think about it, when someone says that it's too hard to do a green space that grows yucca instead of, I don't know, cauliflower or something, what you're doing is that you're taking a colonial approach to environmentalism. And that is why a lot of communities of color get resistant to certain environmentalist movements, because they come with a colonial lens on them. And it should be no surprise that that sometimes a lot of these projects don't work out occasionally, because our communities are naturally in tune to live in an environmentally conscious way. You know, a lot of us are 1 or 2 generations removed from living off the land. My family in Puerto Rico, in many ways, lives off the land. But if I went to a predominantly white community and said, okay, you guys are going to be growing plantains and yucca and all these things that you don't know how to cook, and that your palate isn't accustomed to, it's going to be like cute for a little bit, but it's not easy. You need to make it as easy as possible to kind of just flow into these communities and to make it work. So the way that you do this right is that you don't kind of come into a community and impose what you think is right. That is what so many community development projects get wrong, whether it's housing, whether it's environmental projects. What you need to do is plug in and find leaders in these communities and support them, and also just like pay attention to when they're speaking about these things, because so often they'll be saying these things forever and they just go on deaf ears, and then when someone brings it up from a different community, that's like the first time it's acknowledged, when so many people have been talking about this for a long time. So that's a huge element to all of this.
So you may have heard of Lysenkoism, which is named after Trofim Lysenko. This is just a Wikipedia article, not controversial at all. All of this is well researched, well supported, right? He essentially was some kind of biologist who rejected Darwinian evolutionary theory because he was a communist, and said that natural cooperation was observed in nature as opposed to natural selection, and promised extraordinary advances that never came about. And obviously 3,000 biologists were fired or sent to prison. You know, like, there was state repression against the idea of Lysenkoism, and this caused famines, deliberate famines. Now, you might think, well, why are you telling me about this? And it's because you need to know about the cauliflower, right? So cauliflowers, they grow best in cool daytime temperatures with plentiful sun, moist soil conditions, high in organic matter, and sandy soils. So Europe, that's pretty good. The northern hemisphere is pretty good. This is a yucca plant. These are the yucca genus, right? They are native to hot and dry (arid) parts of the Americas and Caribbean. The desert plants. The cauliflower is not a desert plant. The yucca is a desert plant. The cauliflower is the sort of thing that flourishes in Northern Europe and those sorts of climates. The yucca is not, right? So when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is like, growing cauliflowers is a colonial approach to vegetables, I'm just like, right, I'm looking at the next Lysenkoism. That's what this is. This is the new Lysenkoism, right? She said, and it's all because this is ideological, just like the Soviets, like the cooperation. No, it's not cooperation. It is natural selection. That's what we observe. You're projecting an ideological desire onto it, try and make life fit your ideology, and she's doing the same thing here, right? It's a core component of her Green New Deal legislation is ending colonial attitudes that dominate community gardens. What I love too is growing plants that are culturally familiar to the community. What is this, some sort of fucking blood and soil argument? But it's so important. So that's really how you do it, right? That's such a core component of the Green New Deal, is having all of these projects make sense in a cultural context. And it's in an area we get most pushback on because people say, why do you need to do that? That's too hard. And when they're saying that's too hard, they mean that doesn't work. But she doesn't care. She has an ideology that she's trying to enforce. Some kind of social justice blood and soil argument. But when you really think about it, God, tell me what you really think about. When you really think about it, when someone says that's too hard to do a green space that grows yucca instead of, I don't know, cauliflower or something, what you're doing is you're taking a colonial approach to environmentalism, and that's why a lot of communities of colour get resistant to certain environmentalist movements because they come with the colonial lens on them. I'm not sure that that's the case. I'm not sure it's because you don't want to grow cauliflowers instead of yuccas, right? But the thing is, right, she did this walking the streets of New York after leaving the community garden in the Bronx, right? Now, I'm pretty sure that New York's environment, I mean, I'm just saying as someone who has been there, is not the same as California's. And I'm just saying that when they say that's too hard to grow yucca plants in New York instead of something like that's more that's more suited to the climate, like cauliflowers, that's why it's too hard. And her Lysenkoism, her belief, her core conviction in the blood and soil of native people or ethnic people or whatever, to like as if Africans are growing yucca plants. They're native to the Americas and the Caribbean, right? But anyway, it's basically all the same, right? It's basically all the same. Communities of colour. That means they're basically indigenous to the Americas, even if they came from Africa, right? It doesn't matter. It's all fucking Lysenkoism. It's all ideology. She is not someone, I mean, she literally says it's about being morally correct rather than being factually correct. Well, that's what Lysenkoism was too. It was about being ideologically, politically correct, which is what this is. Instead, sorry about the adverts, by the way. What this is, and she is exactly the same. She is exactly the same as they were in the Soviet Union with regards to this. And they say, oh, it's too hard to do that because it doesn't fucking work. I mean, maybe you can grow yucca plants, but it's obviously more difficult. Otherwise, people wouldn't be saying it. This is the point. Like, New York has a very sort of northern European climate, as I'm aware, or at least it was when I was there. It wasn't California. And again, I've been to California as well. So it's just like, oh, these people are dangerous lunatics. Okay, they are literally going to try and reshape the world in their own ideology, and they are going to enforce it. And if you're not doing it, you're just not working hard enough. You know, if you're not producing this bountiful expectations and again, right, what she's doing is essentially denying evolution. Why would she think a yucca plant would be able to grow in New York as well as it would in its natural environment? Why would she think that? That doesn't make sense. Only an evolution denier would say such a thing, but she is part of the radical left and is probably just like, well, there's no difference between a woman and a man. You know, these are effectively no different. You know, and one can just become another at will because there's nothing else to it. Like, it's the same kind of biology denying nonsense. This is the radical left, and this is like their star candidate in Cortez. Man, the left has gone absolutely insane. Like, pushing this kind of stuff. There's historical precedent for why this is bad. And again, she's fucking with people's food. Like, people are going to go hungry because of this. Well, no, they would if she was getting her way. But it's the same vein. You know, obviously it's not the same scale, but it's the same goddamn vein of thought. Where she's just, again, like some kind of intellectual grifter. Regardless of what, like... And the thing is, I'm not any expert on cauliflowers and yuccas. I just looked up where they naturally grow. And well, what a surprise, there's two completely different environments. That's why they want cauliflower in New York, because it grows there. I guess yuccas don't grow so well. Jesus fucking Christ.